Welcome back to the Historical American Building Survey, California, Volume 6. We begin with the ground running, the property of the Crockers. Now, this is a 14-page, doted-upon property. Rarely have I seen so much effort spent on a single property, and still the majority of it be speculation. 14 pages. Sometimes we just get one sentence. But to paraphrase, Judge Crocker had a couple of buildings. One became an art gallery, and one was the home attached. The art gallery was really just sort of an entertainment center for his family. He had a wife and a daughter. His wife passed, and he married a friend and had 3 more daughters. And while they were in their coming-of-age years, they were very social. And they used this art gallery that he acquired with his money that he made. He was part of the early stages of the Central Pacific Railway. While Leland Stanford was the governor, he was the state Supreme Court Justice. Then he became a board member of the Central Pacific, and then he went to Europe, and he got 1,000 paintings, thousands of old drawings, came back to Sacramento, and he stuffed this house full, and they became an art gallery. But really kind of more of a honeypot to lure in gentlemen of fine standing for the 4 daughters, 2 of which died before the age of 20 somehow. This property was eventually donated to Sacramento, but they say things like the house was built traditionally dated 1852 because certainly it had to be after the fire. You know, this big fire of 1852 it's mentioned in every single property. Everything was built in 1852 in Sacramento after the fire immediately. And it seems to me, especially when you look at the fire again, if you remember the newspaper edition of it, what it looked like. Let me see if I can find there. Either nonsense or a painting a very different story. Boom! There it is. And I'm not sure I was showing this massive explosion of people. Either this place literally got rocked by some power plant explosion, or this is just a bunch of nonsense. And really, the fire is to act as a reason. Well, of course we built everything. After all, it was destroyed after the fire. As a cover story, similar to why in San Francisco, like 80% of everything already burnt down like 5 times. So that's how you know we built it. Same thing in Seattle. Everything was built down, so we raised the city up. That's how you know. Seems to be a West Coast thing in this era. But we digress slightly a bit. Crocker House. The important things to take away from this are that they have no idea. They've tried to piece together with the servants and the staff various additions. There's one bit where they're flummoxed by a staircase in the basement that seems to go even further down, and an exterior wall that appears to be inside the interior of the basement. I found that to be a little bit amusing, knowing what we know about these properties already. What have you done to me? But it is an amazing property, that's for sure. And you know, I do find it interesting that the Supreme Court Justice is also on the board of directors for the railway. The whole story about bringing 700 paintings and 1,000 drawings and just jamming them into this house. It's so questionable. How is it even possible to do this sort of work in America in the 1850s and have no idea who built the house? They have no idea who built this house. Well, it certainly seems like this gentleman over here could be this guy here. I can tell by the
particular type of cornice there that...
It's a Georgian revival, you understand. Well, yes, it could be.
It could be Nathaniel Goodwill, you know.
Recently finishing the Gallatin House at the time. You know, he's very fond of those particular renderings. Ornamental splendor and the poppycock. Take in mind, gentlemen, the Spanish cedar. Never used such a silver-age silk textile. Ah, that's true.
And the white fir tree, as the present floors indicated.
No, that's not cedar. I'm certain that vestibule of the head of the staircase. Floating ceiling? No, not that one. The wainscoting.
Covered with the monk's cloth, you know.
Oh, yes, I remember that. No, Goodale would never use that. And on and on. Even despite its absolute splendor, the tilework alone is just all of the old world accoutrement that we've come to expect. Oh, you know, like the chalices, the little flower, the breasts we see everywhere. It's like, God, enough of the breasts, please. I'm so tired of seeing so many breasts all the time. You know what I mean? Seriously. As if I don't have enough of that in my life. I have to get it from this angle too. The Bobers. Second floor. Fascinating place. Ornamental beyond your wildest dreams. Sacramento Post Office. I'll show you here. This is what it looks like when it's in its completion. I mean, this is one of the more ludicrous examples of a building. It's obviously kind of ridiculous for a post office. And not only that, but it has a lower level with these moats, almost, drawbridge across it. Data on this, it'll tell you that this Sacramento was founded in 1848. But this post office here, they call this the old post office of 1894. It's an important example of Romanesque revival of architecture. It was destroyed. It's described as being high quality and an inspiration for Mr. Frank Lloyd Wright. The original land was acquired by the government in 1891. Construction began in 1891. 2 years later, it was completed. In 1912, the building was 3 stories with a full basement, constructed of Arizona red sandstone. The claim is that in 1944, erosion of the sandstone had become so serious that portions of the exterior had begun to fall off. So they built a large fence around that building. And in 1948, 1.5 stories of the tower, along with decorations in the form of gargoyles and crockets, was removed. After the earthquake of 1957, more of it was removed. Today, very little of the exterior decoration remains, as it's being gradually removed in its entirety for safety reasons. This, of course, is in 1957. It's the only post office in the area that if you saw it, the last film where you show that mission that had been there for 300 years was also composed of red Arizona sandstone. So which is it? Is it the sandstone that lasts the test of time, or is it a weak building material that needs replaced after a decade? Arizona sandstone, usually it's just mountains and buttes are composed of, and small decorative pieces. I mean, the opinions on sandstone vary from impossible to use to it's the building material of the future, and everything in between. This says that this material was used in large, heavy slabs, which is rare, I would say. Here's Johnny's Bottle Shop. This here's the Haywood Building, built in 1857 by Joseph Haywood, sold to the Ogden Mills Bank in 1865. Where it was remodeled, despite only being 8 years old. Here's the other side of her. Not much holding on in the old world other than this Walsh's Beer and Wine. Man, it was just everywhere back then, wasn't it? I feel like every other store was a bottle shop or a beer hall. This here's the Cienfugo Building. No date of erection. Well, thank God. This here's the Collicott Drug Center, built in 1856. Apothecary, W.G. Collicott, publisher of the Sacramento Directory. Now restored as the Haynes Building. This picture's from 1965. Witness. And it also would appear to have a split floor plan. This fancy pants is called the Francis William Fratt Building. Built in 1870, occupied until 1909, demolished in 1969, just a few years after this photo was taken, which is a real tragedy. This one is one of the few buildings to retain most of the original architectural details till its demolition. Less than 100 years old. Mr. Francis Pratt arrived in California in 1850 from New York and became active in cattle raising and the meat business. 3 years later, he was a partner of McNulty and Company and a part owner of the City Market. At one time, he had an interest in the Union Hotel, the Orleans Hotel, and the Bank Exchange Building. He lived here, over the Democratic State Journal office. Ground floor was a drugstore, and he lived as a bachelor until 1879. One of the biggest buildings in Old Sacramento. The city just looks like shit all around it. What a joke. America's cities suck. I mean, look at this trash. This is how we treat stuff. Witness. Pathetic. We can't even keep anything looking nice. Strip it of its ornamentation. Deprive it of its character. Remove all hope. This is the P.B. Cornwall Building. Now, Mr. Cornwall never owned or occupied this building, but he did occupy 2 other buildings that, well, we presume was on the same site. The first one was probably destroyed on November 2nd, 1852. The second one, which was built in 1853, was raised up to a new higher grade of 2nd Street in 1865. Mr. Cornwall, you see, was from New York. He arrived around 1848. An early business associate of Samuel Brannan. You may remember him as the man who ran down the streets of San Francisco with a vial of gold in his hand. And Mr. Cornwall established one of the earliest real estate brokerages in Sacramento. Years later, Cornwall claimed to have built the first building ever in Sacramento. But in the directory of 1860, Mr. J. Horace Culver claims that the first building was erected by Mr. Samuel Brannan in January 1849. At any rate, Cornwall was one of the first to devote all of his efforts to real estate. He was one of the first councilmen, representative of Sacramento District in the first state legislature in 1850. Due to the flooding, of course, of 1861, everything on this street was raised to story height. There's enough of the original architectural details left over from the 1865 period to give a good idea of its appearance at the time. Basically, the ornamentation's been stripped, but you can still tell it's old world. The arched openings, the arched second floor windows, the ornamental brackets. Quite an interesting story for such a basic building. And they're in great shape now, as you can tell. Like every downtown, Sacramento, too, is booty. This is the Bank Exchange Building. Typical commercial structure of the mid-1880s in Sacramento. Plastered brick. The original brick plastered over. Arched window and a space where 3 windows have been blocked and covered on the first and second floors. So many windows. One has to wonder what its original use was. Photographed 1965. The Booth Building, a wholesale grocery business, begun in 1850. The northern portion, which is now demolished, was the original site. Newton later became the governor and a U.S. senator from 1875 to 1881. From grocer to senator in 24 years. Interesting. Round arched windows. Here. Cast iron pilasters. Here. North half of the building, destroyed by fire before World War II. No idea why they picked that random qualifier. Destroyed sometime before World War II. It is uncertain when this was built, but the site was acquired by Booth in 1873. Is this one even worth it? Well, there are 7 round arched openings on the one side alone. This one doesn't count. It's a different building. The other side of it has 4 openings, 4 arched openings. You'll notice the familiar brickwork. This, of course, is the Brannan building. That name just keeps coming up everywhere in Old World, California. Sam Brannan, the Mormon merchant who was instrumental in the development of Sacramento City and instrumental in the encouragement of the gold rush, and the owner of San Francisco's first newspaper. This man's been everywhere. Might have built the first building in Sacramento if you let him tell a story. Other than that, not much of interest there. This is the front door, or the northern facade. Looking, again, stripped of all ornamentation everywhere, and really looking none too pleased about it. Couldn't help it, I'm sorry. Please find it in your heart to forgive me and my lunacy. I swear I won't do it again. We all know that's a lot. Do it in like 5 freaking minutes, probably. The Cavert building, built in 1865, allegedly, and restored as part of the downtown district. Although it's funny that this says 1856. So who's lying, America? Who? They probably all are. This is Nathaniel Dingley's coffee and spice business. His residence was on the 2nd floor. The man was born in Maine, left for the California gold mines in 1849. This was one of a succession of many endeavors. He remained at this residence until his death in 1897. Later on, it was used as an inexpensive rooming house. It's brick, it's 2 stories, and it has some weird stuff going on down there. That looks like an arched window to me. So does that right there. Curious and curious. These photographs are of Sutter's Fort, and it says McCurry down here. These photographs are credited to an unknown photographer. Indeed, it must be some time later that they're able to take this picture, then even that car would seem to indicate, if I'm looking at this correctly. But regardless, this is what we're told it looked like most of the time. Willie Nelson, of course, roaming around the perimeters, intoxicated. At some point, this very suspicious fort that was purchased from the Russians for something like 3 towels and a seashell, allegedly. The Russian cannons were still left inside, allegedly. See, there's proof it was a fort. You made rice paddy farmer very unhappy. It's gonna tinkle right on him. Actually, it looks like a giant elephant. Tusks right here. Big old ears right here. See? Elephant. Kind of pissed, too. You better run, boy. That's one way to do that. You must get a lot of snow there, huh? To need that kind of door. And, wow. They mean to include this one? Okay. This must be what we're seeing here. Explain to me the mud. Sacramento. Of course, I can explain. This pack of rapscallions. This bunch of dewdrappers. Come on out, Larry. Got a surprise for you. Come on out the gate. Sad Cannon stares peacefully out over lake, while Rice Paddy Hat Farmer stands mute in the background. If that photo's too new, have an older one. Have one where we just framed up and isolated the dreamy green cannon. The survey's got them all. Look, here's the same cannon surrounded by a nice little garden. Oh, here he is again from a different angle. Oh, the candle room, the brewery, and distillery, and a fort, a shoemaker's shop, the sleeping room, the meat room. Where's the conservatory? Call this a fort, do you? That was bar and Fort Ayers scene. And just look at all these goods. Why, so many goods they couldn't even put them inside. It's like, how dare you lie to me? You know what I mean? Like, how dare you? How dare? It's one thing to show pictures, and to great effect, I might add, and compare it to the narratives and things that were told about the past. But it's another thing to kind of like ploddingly go through it from different angles and seeing just a little surface dive, a shallow dive on some of these properties, and you see the names that keep popping up over and over and over. So, well, yeah, you could say, you know, it's sort of weird that guy Sutter's, that fort, that really, really actually terrible person by all accounts, a total a-hole. And this man is also linked to Samuel Brannan. And just in the amount of times that these Stanfords and these politicians seems like a very small world sometimes when you're down in here. And I've noticed that with these properties, most of them are ignored with 1 or 2 sentences, except the ones that feature some of these men. Almost as if they've thought too hard about it. It's too much of a backstory. A well-polished lie. Which is, well, what we believe it is. At least I do over here. I'm raising my hand and looking around. I'm not seeing anyone. It's just no one in here. That's true. Don't say that so loud, Jimmy. God. Engineers, you know, they can be a real butt sometimes. Especially the ones that don't exist. Like Jimmy, who, even if he did exist, probably wouldn't even be an engineer. Odds are. This here is the Big 4 building. Originally 3 separate buildings that were erected in 1851 and 1852. The lower floor occupied by merchants that were later associated with the founding of the first transcontinental railroad, linking California with the East, which became the Central Pacific Railway, who then moved their office right upstairs. 1862. The Big 4, huh? Well, I wonder who's a part of this. The 3 buildings that were separate, but are now one. The Stanford building, erected by Josiah Stanford. He purchased the lot in 1851 and replaced the existing building. In 1851, there was already a building there, and in 1850, and you're going to replace it? Because I was just told that the earliest building in San Francisco was in 1849 or 1850. So that means that whatever building you're replacing has only been there a year. And it also means that that building survived the Great Fire. After the 1852 fire, it happened to be the only community hall available, and was the meeting place of both the Masons and the Oddfellows. Imagine that. The one building that survived the fire is the meeting place of the Masons and the Oddfellows. It's almost like they're coming together in a form of unity. Leland Stanford, future California governor, joined his brother and became the manager. There was also Collie P. Huntington, Mark Hopkins, and Charles Crocker. You know Crocker. He of the art gallery we looked at earlier. Governor Leland Stanford, by the way, is also the governor. Remember, while Charles Crocker was also the Supreme Court Justice. An article in the Sacramento Union of 1862 here states that the governor, Leland Stanford, had given instructions to W.P. Knox to begin to fix up commodious offices for the use of the company. Well, how about that? The governor told W.P. Knox, whoever that is, to fix up the offices for use of the company in which he was a founding member. No, there's no conflict of interest here. The building next door was completely destroyed in the fire of 1852 and rebuilt in also late 1852 by Collis P. Huntington. Now, it's wholesale business and miners' supplies. Imagine that. Miners' supplies. It is important to note that these three buildings were obviously elevated to meet the new street level. The Great Flood of 61 washed away many of the foundations of buildings in the commercial district, including the newly foundations of the state capitol buildings, which was then under construction. Since the existing streets were only 9 feet above sea level, why, flooding of the district was common. So street levels, but not the alley levels, were raised prior to 1865 to prevent future damage, but not the alley levels. They're still going to be low, okay, guys? An examination of present buildings in the old Sacramento area reveals that these buildings were either raised or, as in the building on 50th Street, the ground floor became the basement level. Such was the fate of the Brannan building, and here, in this article about the Big Four, it wanders off into talking about Samuel Brannan again. Present girders that could have been the location of the jacks used to elevate the structure. Could have been. In summary, the Big Four building offers little in the way of architectural interest, but it is of importance historically as being the site of early planning of the building of the first transcontinental railway. The Big Four building is scheduled for demolition to make way for a new freeway. 1958. Now, this here is Diana's Saloon, erected in 1852 by D.A. Whipley on the site of the Stinking Tent, the first Sacramento gambling hall, erected in 1849. This structure, too, was elevated when the street grade was raised. Hard to tell behind all this dumpy shit, but this does have 4 arched openings, ornate paneled shafts, Corinthian capitals. Not there. 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 Oh, God. We did it again. We woke him up. Just side of the wall. I'm not here. It's not happening. I'm not here. This is like a drawing. What the hell is this? Oh, of course. Back to the mansion in the ground. You Leland Stanford making the same fucking paper. God, I get it, okay? 4 people are responsible for Sacramento. 4 did all of it. I get it. We talk about something new, ma'am. 22-page document about this house. Well, don't get me wrong, it's impressive, but a 22-page document is ridiculous. Oh, just let me just jerk myself off all over the place to show everyone what a fancy person I am. Make sure you write a good one. Usually it's a note card, I understand that, but we can bend the rules a bit, shall we? Can't be going down history with, anything less than a substantial epithet. To be our end, then let us make it a most glorious end.
Yes, sir, Mr. Stanford. We'll get right on it.
So, you'd like to know about this building, would you? Well, where to begin? Well, as a private home and later as an official mansion for 2 California governors, actually. The building is closely associated with a number of important social and political events of the period from 1857. It was built in 1874 when the Stanfords moved to San Francisco. Are you with me so far? Since 1900, 2 different names, Roman Catholic state swords, became a focus of orphan children, prominent children, as well as an occasional set of vast festivities in 1939. Sacramento architecturally is one of the most impressive residential buildings to survive from the 19th century. Its various revisions, however, resulted in a structure which is a cross-section of architectural factions yet a unified whole. The constitution of the interiors after 1939 is somewhat as they were in the 1870s, as well as the presence of untouched period fittings, making a rare example of high Victorian tastes. Silver Age. Fire. So, it's comparable to the great houses destroyed in the San Francisco earthquake and fire. Wink, wink. Nudge, nudge.
Old world building, still and destroyed.
I'm sure. You made this at a time when you didn't even have paved roads. What kind of a bloomin' idiot to think you're talking to? Mr. Fogus was the first owner of the home. He was born in Richmond, veteran of the Mexican War, and actually painted a large scene of the fall of Colonel John Hardin at the Battle of Buena Vista.
which he later took about the country to prove happened. Oh, another fabricator. I see. His last name was Fogus, of course. Of course he's being dishonest. Cross between phony and bogus. Anyway, he bought 2 lots from William Dodd, built a small structure for $2,000. In 1857, Seth Babson was commissioned to design a fine house of brick and plaster. This property was deeded to Leland Stanford for $8,000 cash. The sale was executed on July 10th, but recorded on July 11th. Pointless information. Shelton Fogus, by the way, went on to leave Sacramento to seek his fortune in the Comstock and became a founder of Reno, Nevada, while Stanford became the governor of California. His inauguration, Mr. Stanford, took place January 10th, 1862. He returned from the ceremonies in a rowboat, since the winter had saw severe flooding of Sacramento. He returned to his new house by rowboat. Some of the furniture was floating in the first... That, by the way, was just the first 3 pages of me paraphrasing. It goes on for another 20 pages. A ridiculous amount of nonsense. Pretty clear to me which people, of which there seem to be a handful, are responsible for the majority of this in this city. But it'll go on here. It's unclear when this was actually constructed. Shelton Fogus in 1857 paid for the lots, as we discussed. The ornamental flavor of the corner, see, this is full of such flowery language that it's really ridiculous. Things about picturesque, asymmetric massings of the Italian villa, the high tower so often seen in these periods' houses, distinctly Georgian block, a fashionable Mannerist ornament of the 1850s, described as a 2-story, finished in a costly manner, fruit trees, shrubbery, etc. surrounding it. The mansion is the most perfect specimen of a residence in the state. Well, no wonder he grew so bored of it after 10 years, Mr. Stanford. The saloons on the side of the hall occupy the whole side of the building. They're lofty and elegant, being 16 feet high. The side centers are ornamented with Corinthian columns and caps, with architraves over the doors, rich central ornaments of pure white for the chandeliers, and a fine contrast to the oak grain woodwork. The chambers are 14 feet high, finished perfectly. The mansion is lofty, with a heavy, rich cornice. Front entrance furnace with Corinthian columns and caps. The outside is brick, painted a delicate stone color. It is possible that the structure here was the building erected after 1856 for Fogus, but not mentioned. Nothing was modified until 1871, when the entire house was, of course, jacked up a full story, to permit more entertainment, of course. Not because of the flood, to permit more entertainment. The new wing contained a ballroom. Same designer as the Crocker house you may have heard in the art gallery. You may have heard of that. Mr. Nathaniel Goodell. Didn't we talk about this already? It really waxes on and on about this for 10 pages. The Stanford house contains 44 rooms, all most elaborately and luxuriously furnished and fitted up. Good taste and cultured imagination have been exhausted in furnishing the establishment. Magnificent and costly furniture in every room, lace curtains of the finest fabrics, carpets that receive with noiseless tread, frescoes beautiful in design, exquisite and artistic perfection adorn the walls and ceilings, large bouquets of natural flowers, pendant from which artificial birds warble the rarest music. Artificial birds which warble the rarest music? The hell does that mean? And there is a billiard room, actually. There is room for 200 guests at the sitting. There's even a waterproof double parlor. A double parlor? God damn! I ain't even got me one parlor. The hell is a parlor, anyway? What is a parlor, and how do I know if I have one?
I think it's some place where you can just sort of sit down as a guest and eat some cookies.
Oh, in that case, I got like every room's a fucking parlor around here.
It's up to me to determine how many parlors are in my house, don't you think?
In that case, outside in the backyard, you'll notice we have a roofless parlor. Oh, in 1971, they replaced the double parlor with a chapel in the basement, over the marble fireplace. There's an elevator, there's a glass enclosed porch for dining. There's a bird room and a supper room. There's a bunch of rooms that the author of this wasn't allowed to study. All the contents gradually were dispersed. 6 brick chimneys. On and on and on. Enough about this fucking place. And enough about Mr. Stanford. We get it. You want to date him. He's everything we're not. Evil, corrupt, non-living, maybe even not real. You ever think about that? Mr. Scientist. Wow, this is Mr. Stanford. He looks like a rather sinister person. God, they both do. Ugh, kind of creepy. Welcome to our humble home. We hope you find everything to your liking. Everything's fine, sir. Thank you. I'm going back in. Mission San Juan Bautista, built around, somewhere between 1797 and 1812. Present owner would be the Roman Catholic Church, adobe bricks, some burnt bricks, 1-story church building, and Baroque monastery. This was recorded, by the way, in 1934. No record of any architect. The present condition is described as parts are good, number of stories 1, Materials of construction, adobe. Think it don't be, but adobe dough. And that's all we get out of this. Compare that to and there's a lot more going on here. Well, I mean, not a lot more, but there is a lot going on here for that to be reduced to, 4 sentences that were written in 1934. And I'm guessing it's not around anymore. But yeah, I think this deserves a little bit more than that, don't you? Built in 1791 with this kind of ceiling. This thing looking like it's got some years on it. What happened here, Jimmy? You guys get a little rowdy last night? And all the nights? Brick covered with plaster, as we've come to expect. And this is a cool, rustic, old place. This is around since for that long. Wild. And I believe this is all part of that property. These pictures stretch for a while. This is El Molino Viejo, built between 1810 and 1812, under supervision of Padres Alvadea of San Gabriel Mission for a grist mill. Later on purchased by the Attorney General of California, of course. Also bought by Henry Huntington. Where we heard about? Oh yeah, the Big Four guy. Of course. The first grist mill in California. Of course. Operated by water power, water being brought by flume from nearby Los Robles Canyon. Really? Operated by water power. What do you think they meant by that? An earthquake in 1812 damaged the reservoir or basin adjoining the mill in such a manner that it became necessary to abandon the structure as a mill. And that little tidbit right there, that is a golden nugget of information. That is why I do this. That tells you so much right there. And about so many other mills that we find abandoned, especially on the West Coast. I've always wondered that, why you find these big water stations that are abandoned and all the steampunk looking water wheel stuff is inside. An earthquake in 1812 damaged the reservoir in such a manner that it became necessary to abandon the structure as a mill. So that right there is telling you. It was written in 1937. That's what happened to all those places. The year of 1812, which is very, very interesting in a lot of ways. But it was full of natural disasters. And it's starting to seem to me like 1812 was the year that they came for America. The parasites came and really struck this part of the world hard with some sort of weaponry, some sort of methods that just threw everything into uproar and wiped out or chased out so many people. They kicked us down this road. That's when everything starts to get real funny. Can I help you, young man? No, sir, just leaving. Thank you. I'm no detective. I'm going to guess that this door is nearer than the rest of the building. And this is where you go, children, if you want to collect rare spider bites and strange injuries from rusty metal items. If you're looking for tetanus, why, you'll find it here. Then you can go back to Fantasyland. Yay! Which is what this place looks like. I know what this place is. Been here before. Well, Coronado Hotel, we meet again. Only this time, I'm not staying, nor am I driving past. This time, I'm looking at pictures of you from years ago, yes. Maybe things will make sense now. This is a monumental, luxurious resort guesting of the past and present. 6 United States presidents have stayed here, also the Prince of Wales. The date of its erection was 1887, in the very interesting 1888 year, which we've seen that number before. Construction. It officially opened for business. James and Merritt Reed from Canada were the architects. MIT, of course. And the École des Beaux in Paris, of course, where all architects went to school at this time. They moved to San Francisco and they designed many a notable building, including the Central Tower and the Music Pavilion in Golden Gate Park. The property was bought in 1885 by the Coronado Beach Company. Babcock and Story were the men that bought it, from Peachy and Aspinwall. Really. Aspinwall and Story. Cute. To keep it open, Babcock and Story accepted a loan of $100,000 from Mr. Spreckles. Well, Mr. Spreckles returns to us. How about that? Spreckles of the Spreckles Mansion, sir. Oh yes, I'm very familiar with you. It was like 2 episodes ago. Until 1948, of course. Then Barney Goodman, the real estate mogul, bought it. Since 1963, it's been owned by the Hotel del Coronado Corporation with Mr. Larry Lawrence as the chairman of the board. The labor was provided by Chinese 7 companies of San Francisco. That's convenient. There'll be no history about that. They came here, they built this, they go away, never to be seen again. Later on in 1938, the architect James Reed recalled Babcock's original plans for the hotel by saying, I remember him saying it should be built around a court. A garden of tropical trees, shrubs and flowers with pleasant paths. Balconies should look down on this court from every story. From the south end, the foyer should be open to Glorietta Bay with verandas for rest and promenade. On the ocean corner, there should be a pavilion tower, and northward along the ocean, a colonnade terraced and grassed to the beach. The dining wing should project at an angle from the southeast corner and be almost detached to give full value to the view of the ocean, bay, and city. That's exactly what he said. I can hear it still in my head today, as it was 40 years ago. However, despite that illustrious quote, we are told that speed of construction seemed to be of primary importance to Babcock. The hotel was constructed of wood at a time when San Diego had neither an abundance of lumber nor skilled carpenters. They had to resort to importing green lumber from Northern California. Thank God for the Chinese 7 companies. The skill of the workers improved because they were trained on the job, yet still managed to create one of the most fine and elaborate, detailed hotel of all time. Complete work facilities had to be established on the undeveloped peninsula. I forgot to mention, it's basically on an island. They constructed a ferry and a street railway system. Even the water had to be imported, pumped through pipes extending under the bay from San Diego river wells. All of this, for a hotel here, it took you a year to do. Pipes under the bay from San Diego. Very few detailed drawings were prepared. Oh, really? Instead, many general sketches were used, to the fact that the unskilled laborers could not read the drawings. They couldn't read drawings, Difficult to date any of the modifications over the years. For instance, the alternations of spaces on the lower floors. The renovation of the exterior openings. Why, in 1916 we had to replace the gravity sprinkler system with a high-pressure Grinnell sprinkler system. 25 to 30 bathrooms were added. Some rooms were added. A false ceiling was added in the ballroom. The smoke shop has been modernized, after all. And just look at those crown light fixtures. And of course we built this with unskilled laborers as fast as we fucking could. Doesn't that make sense? This shape here. Doesn't this look familiar? Of course it does. This is your power station. This is your cathedral. This is your bastion for your former star fort. Here and here. Here's the remaining tower. The grid. The fort. One wonders how they got this bird's eye view, don't you? Interesting subterranean entrance there. Very, very interesting. This is an iconic construction in San Diego, this island, and the things on it. I know it well, but I hadn't looked at it through these lenses. This is the Witch Creek Schoolhouse. Lovely name for it, really. One of the last surviving, and probably the most ambitious, of the one-room schoolhouses constructed in the San Diego County. Erected in 1888, architect unknown, the building has been retained until 1971 it was moved. The Witch Creek School was constructed for the Santa Isabel School District. The name Witch Creek was from a town that was laid out but never developed. Oh, really? That sounds like a ridiculous lie.
What are you named after? A town? Well, where's the town? We planned it, but it was never a town.
A small Queen Anne-style building that is among the most elaborate of the many one-room schoolhouses.
Don't worry, witches don't live here. They only work here.
Oh, I know. But I think that's enough for now, although this is probably a bit more boring than usual. I've learned a few things, and I need to examine them a little more thoroughly. Next up, the Bishop's School, built in 1909. It was a girls' school. Mr. Irving J. Gill was the architect. He applied the modified California mission style, which he found to be so compatible to Southern California climate and the way of life. In 1917, the chapel was designed by Carlton Winslow. Where have I heard that name before? He came to San Diego specifically to design the California Tower in Balboa Park for the 1915 Panama American Exposition, of course. While he was there, him and Louis Gill just decided to fuck around and build a chapel for Reverend Johnson, the first bishop of L.A., to establish a boarding school for the higher education of women. Of course. Now, the tower was initially built in 1930 in memory of the bishop, but it's been removed since. The tower was designed by Mr. Carlton Winslow. After the earthquake in 1938, though, it was condemned as unsafe, and Mr. Winslow, the chapel's architect, painted the imitation stained glass himself. Wow, who'd have thought we'd run into the same damn people here as well? And it looks like we are headed into San Diego for the next one. Place I know well. And, I apologize if this was a little dry, but I'm kind of learning as I go here. Not only about these properties, but about how to take really boring material and make it so that people want to hear about it. The nuggets that slipped through the cracks here. I mean, I didn't know who Samuel Brannan and half these guys were until recently, and now I feel like they're the most nefarious men in all of California. If they even existed. It could be fiction, who knows. Anyway, enjoy the original music that has nothing at all to do with this survey. By yours truly, and I'll see you soon.
Ladies and gentlemen,